like, the quiet, picturesque area of North Kerry is rarely embroiled in controversy. But at the moment, the proposed building of a new natural gas terminal is causing tensions within the community. Now, to be fair, it appears that the majority of people in the area do want it built. But there are others, primarily those whose homes tend to be nearest the site of the plant, who are deeply concerned for the safety, not just of themselves, but for their families. Tomorrow is the final day for submissions to On Board Planola. Katie Hanna now tells the story.
We've just started asking questions and we're not getting answers. There's no such thing as a stupid question, there's just embarrassing answers.
What they really want to do is to trust the people who are running the operation. But the minute that trust is lost, then the floodgates are open.
Everything will be out in the open and we'll be able to discuss it. And we will not fall out amongst ourselves. We'll have our differences, but we won't fall out.
Kilcolgan, a rural community set between Tarbert and Ballylongford on the banks of the Shannon in North Kerry.
This area is known to locals simply as the Land Bank. It was assembled over 50 years ago in order to attract industry to the area, and since then barely an election has passed without some grand scheme being promised for this land bank. None of them have ever come to anything. Now finally it appears that one such grand scheme is about to come to fruition, but not everybody in the area is happy about it.
The proposed project is a liquefied natural gas terminal. Natural gas is frozen until it turns into a liquid. This liquid gas, or LNG, can then be transferred into these massive tankers and shipped around the world. Shannon LNG, an Irish subsidiary of the American Hess Corporation, wants to build a jetty on the Shannon estuary to receive this fuel, as well as 4 50-metre-high tanks to store it. Proposals to build these facilities have generated much controversy in recent years, particularly in the US and the UK, because of fears that shipping and storing such enormous quantities of gas represent a major hazard. In North Kerry, the majority of the local residents are enthusiastic about the development.
I would suggest to you that 95% of the population here are in favour of this. But the 5% that have their difficulty, if their concerns are allayed by On Board Planola, a lot of those, I believe, will come around. I don't think they're against it in principle. They're just concerned for safety and they want to see how it can be best addressed.
So this is the only real prospect we have of any jobs coming here. A project like this will generate in the region of 400 jobs during its construction. Added to that, there will be about 50 full-time jobs, permanent jobs, and about another 50 jobs servicing the site itself. A job like this, a project like this, will bring in the region of 5 million annually to the economy, an economy which is declining.
There is no dispute in this area about the need to create employment here.
This area has been totally neglected by successive governments and it is an employment black spot. I don't deny that. But at the end of the day, this will yield 50 long-term jobs. And as I said, if politicians are serious about creating employment in this area, this should be rejected and we should look for something which will yield more employment, which will be safe and which will not harm the environment.
Some of those living closest to the development have formed a committee to oppose the project. They now have 57 signatures on a petition calling for the development to be denied planning permission. Their main objection is on safety grounds.
I asked the LNG representatives, their engineers, what would happen if 58 million gallons spilled? And the only answer he could give me was, you could stand behind a tree. And now one of the neighbours said, what do you do? How do you tell your own 3-year-old son, if there's a big explosion, just stand behind the tree? On this coastline, there aren't many trees anyway. And they cannot answer those questions because I don't think they want people to know what the risk is.
While the LNG industry has operated successfully around the world for decades, there have been a number of major incidents involving LNG spills. The first dates back to the infancy of the industry in 1944, when an explosion at an LNG facility levelled a square mile of Cleveland in the US, killing 128 people. The most recent was in Algeria 3 years ago, when 27 workers were killed in a blast at an LNG plant run by the American Halliburton Corporation.
My understanding is that the Algeria plant is different from what's proposed down here. In Algeria, they were separating the gases. It was what they call a liquefaction plant. Here we have a gas storage plant. It's a liquid gas we're storing. And as long as it's stored at a certain temperature, it should be safe.
Primetime travelled to London to talk to Dr. Tony Cox, an independent energy consultant with decades of experience looking into the safety aspects of LNG.
The proposition that one brings in large quantities of bulk LNG and then drip feeds that, so to speak, into the national gas transmission grid system is a proposition that has to be based on the idea that we know how to do that so well that we can engineer out any risk of that LNG escaping. And there's never such a thing as no risk at all. The best that can ever be done, whether we're doing something like flying in a civil airliner or taking a high-speed passenger train, is to reduce the risk a very long way. And that's essentially what is done in the case of the LNG industry.
After many months of consultations with Shannon LNG, local community representatives say they are satisfied that this project is safe.
They've answered our questions and they've been very open with us. And we did go off to Wales and we went to Zeebrugge and to Barcelona. And we had free rein when we were out in those places to ask questions of the people on the site, the people in the locality, the people who had an involvement with the project. So from that point of view, yes, we believe the company were very straight and very open.
Personally, I don't have fears because I trust the system that is there to guarantee our safety. That is on board Penala and the HSA. And from what I've seen and what I've read in relation to the project, I am quite happy with it.
However, this view is not universally held in this area.
Do you not accept that it is ultimately and has proven itself to be a safe industry?
I mean, as a local, I'm not into probabilities or mathematics. I'm actually living here. If there is a probability, no matter how low, of an accident actually occurring here, that is what I'm concerned about.
If they had said at the very beginning that there are safety concerns with this type of plant, but that we have the capacity and the know-how to deal with it, I would have accepted that. But they came along and said that this is absolutely safe, it just evaporates into the air.
This reassuring claim that spilled LNG is lighter than air is repeatedly stated in the brochures circulated by Shannon LNG. Shannon LNG declined to participate in this programme. In a statement to Primetime this week, the company again insisted that spilled LNG warms on contact with air and then quickly rises and dissipates. We put this to Dr. Cox.
The part about it being lighter than air is completely false. I myself have seen this on a number of mainly American websites. I don't understand really why this myth, and it is a myth, has become so current, because 25, 30 years ago, when the first wave of development in the LNG industry took place, a lot of research was done onto exactly this point. Are these vapor clouds lighter than air or denser than air? And the conclusion was unequivocally reached, both in theory, by theory and in experiment, that these vapor clouds remain denser than air throughout all of the important part of their dispersion until well beyond the point where they become dilute and safe.
Dr. Cox went on to explain why this issue is so significant.
These vapor clouds are flammable gas. If they ignite, there's at the minimum a very damaging flame which could certainly injure and kill people. It could also do a lot of damage to buildings if it got into buildings and those buildings then exploded, which is a possibility. Those scenarios, of course, have all got to be looked at in terms of their likelihood. Such a thing has never happened in all the time that LNG has been traded around the world.
As this project is deemed to be in the national interest, it is one of the first private projects to qualify for consideration under the Strategic Infrastructure Act.
This procedure is intended as a fast-track procedure, and people are concerned that in the rush to reach an early decision, their rights will be trampled on. People are also concerned about the new role of An Bord Pleanála. It's a facilitator. Its staff will meet with the developer in advance of the application ever being made. This puts the developer in a special position, and people will think they're no longer on an even playing field.
This is a Seviso 2 site, which is the most dangerous site you can have. And to rush it through in 18 weeks, where each government body is dealing with different aspects of the planning application in parallel, it means that the general public do not know the risks that are involved until after planning permission is given.
As a major hazard project, it must comply with an EU directive setting out strict land use provisions for the surrounding site.
The Seveso 2, or to give it its proper title, the Major Accidents Hazards Directive, is intended to ensure that separation distances are kept between dangerous substances and other types of development.
Locals fear that this designation will sterilise the area.
I'm worried that if this goes through, the planning permission is allowed, will there be any more houses allowed being built in this area? Will people be allowed to develop sites? Will the value of land reduce because of the safety aspect? And that's a big concern.
If planning permission is granted, then there will be restrictions within certain buffer zones, and development within that area will be limited. We don't know how large it will be in this case, but there are separation zones prescribed of up to 2 kilometres in the past.
While LNG spills that lead to fires or explosions are considered highly unlikely, much effort has gone into establishing the distance from an LNG spillage that would represent a safe buffer zone. Most recently in the US, experts have suggested that anyone within a 3-mile radius of a spillage would be in harm's way.
In the village of Tarbert is within the 3-mile zone. Ballylongford is within the 3-mile zone. But it operates on an assumption that no mitigating circumstances are put in place to prevent, reduce or cut off a leak, if such a leak were to develop.
In its statement to Primetime, Shannon LNG said that it has no doubts whatsoever about the safety of the project. With the deadline for submissions to Onboard Planola set for tomorrow, tensions are rising in this tight-knit community.
If the only answer they can come up with is, you're a crank, shut up, don't say anything. I mean, I don't know what happens in the rest of the country, but I'm living here, this is my county, and I'm very proud of it. And if we think we can just bring in industrial development just because some speculator has found good land to build on, I think that's very sad.
They're our parishioners, they're our neighbours, they're our friends, so we do sympathise with them. But we are very hopeful that the Onboard Planola will exercise its duty, bearing in mind that this is the very first plant of its kind that's going into Ireland. There'll be an extra special onus on Onboard Planola to make sure that there are proper safety systems in place to deal with any possible risk.
For our expert, the risks associated with an LNG import terminal are ultimately acceptable.
The risk is in fact extremely low, and any rational person or any person who's fully informed ought to be prepared to accept them, and I would.
It remains to be seen if the people of Kilcolgan will ever be similarly convinced.
That was Katie Hannon reporting from North.